Hey, what's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching Gamescript. On today's episode, we're going to be breaking down the Super Bowl. We got the Kansas City Chiefs versus the San Francisco 49ers. Looking at a 49ers are current 2.5-point favorites. That could easily swing to the Chiefs at some point this week. And it's going to be a good game. And it's a rematch of the Super Bowl from a few years ago when the Kansas City beat San Francisco. So hoping for a different outcome on this Super Bowl. I'm joined today by Jordan Vanek, formerly of 33rd Team. He's also done work in the past with Stochastic and also for 4. And Jordan, it's good to have you on today. I like Jordan's analysis. He does a great detailed breakdown of matchups and schemes and stuff like that for wide receivers versus different defensive schemes. But what's going on, Jordan? Good to have you on.
Yeah, appreciate you having me, man. Yeah, it's going to be a great Super Bowl. I truly believe it always ends up, at least most of the time, it ends up being the two best teams in the sport. And when we don't think that, it's usually the team that's the underdog that ends up winning, like the Philadelphia Eagles a few years back with the Brady Super Bowl. But this time you got Mahomes versus a juggernaut of a team. Everybody will have their criticisms on Brock Purdy, but at the end of the day, Brock Purdy has been phenomenal this postseason, and they've been able to do it in a multitude of ways.
Yeah, and that's one thing with Purdy. People giving him the game manager narrative and all that. And what I've noticed with Brock Purdy, I kind of caught on with him early because I like his demeanor on the field. He's got a lot of confidence, a lot of swag. And when I had a former career, I was a professional. I worked in professional wrestling as a producer. And one of the things that I used to have to look out for, because I was in talent development and stuff like that, is the confidence that the wrestlers would have in the ring. And there's a kind of an it factor there. And I noticed early with Brock Purdy, with some of the plays that he was making, the confidence he was playing with, you could tell that he had kind of that it factor. And I was very confident that he would have some success in the league. I didn't think that he'd have this much success, though. He's got to the conference championship last year, and then, of course, this year he makes it to the Super Bowl. So I do think that he has a lot of swag. I think he's underrated, and I think that if people kind of go with that narrative and we can catch some discount on him as far as his ownership, then, I mean, it could be an interesting slate.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, the game manager thing, who cares? It's at the end of the day, he's getting his guys the ball accurately. He's also proven that he can run and kind of scramble that he did in the Detroit Lions game. He came down from behind, took the lead early, and then held it. He went down in the fourth quarter to score against the Green Bay Packers. Yes, is he handing the ball off to Christian McCaffrey? That's fine. I know Tom Brady handed the ball off to LeGarrette Blount plenty when he was playing the Andrew Lucks, or even before that when he was playing Peyton Manning. We discredit quarterbacks who just simply win.
Yeah, exactly. And, Brock Purdy, he's been leading the league in a lot of those quarterback metrics. And he's in a matchup against Kansas City this week where they blitz a lot, but he's got a 70% blitz completion rate. They play man coverage a lot, but he's got a 67% completion rate against man coverage with 129 passer rating. These are a lot of the categories that he is one of the top quarterbacks in the league this season. And I think on paper, at least, he's got a really good matchup despite Kansas City's defense being really good. And I think the part of the field that he focuses on the most, of the short passes and everything, that's going to give him a big advantage with guys like Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey. And I just think that he's set up on paper to have a pretty good matchup considering the circumstances.
Yeah, so from my end, it comes down to this. The way that I think Shanahan has planned out big game moments, whether it was a Super Bowl against the Patriots when they took the 28-3 lead, whether it was the first time these two teams matched up, it really boils down to what is the weak point of the Kansas City Chiefs defense and how do I take advantage of it? So for starters, their corners are arguably the best in football. L'Jarius Sneed is the most underrated player in the entire game. I think he is a better player than the Sauce Gardners, than some of the other corners, because he does one thing that no other corner does. He will play outside. He will also play inside. If you want to try to hide your best player, he will just simply follow him He's been unbelievable against the run this year, but obviously he's dealt with some injuries. So from a matchup standpoint, you have two really, really good corners with him and Trent McDuffie, and two really, really good receivers with Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel. The way that I think Shanahan is going to be playing this game is they don't get to see many teams that try to play just two receivers on the field. The 49ers love putting just Juszczyk out there, and when they go and put like McCaffrey in the slot, and then they put McCaffrey out wide, and then they put one of the receivers inside. What do you do with your corners? Are you going to put a linebacker one-on-one with Christian McCaffrey out there? Like, how do you kind of play chess with the 49ers from a pass catching perspective? So I agree with you on the McCaffrey call of like him being a pass catcher in this game is going to be a huge role. The other player I will say, you have two elite corners. They've got Justin Reed, who's one of the better safeties in football. The player to attack on this defense is Mike Edwards. He's been the player who's given up the most touchdowns all season. When you watch from the film perspective, he's late in rotations when they try to go to their cover 3 sky where he's coming down to the ball. He's late on rotations when they try to, come out of their blitzes. And Kittle loves seeing safeties that can't cover, and he is one of those guys. So I think from matchup standpoint, Shanahan has two guys that he can really depend on. It's going to be McCaffrey and Kittle. While Deebo and Aiyuk, it's simply going to come down to who are they going to match up with L'Jarius Sneed and who can actually win quickly against those guys.
Right. Yeah, that's a good breakdown right there. And before we get into to building some of these lineups, hit the like button. I'm looking for about 20 likes to put out another show later on in the week. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm at about 480 something right now. So I'm about 20 short of hitting 500, which was my goal for the end of the season. So I definitely appreciate everyone helping out with that. And let's take a look at this player pool, Jordan, and kind of get an idea of who we like in general. But why don't you give us just a general overview of what you think happens in this game?
Overview, I think that the 49ers are the team that wins this one. I know Vegas has them as a 2-point spread. I think there's a chance that we see, like, the Chiefs offense has been great this postseason. I honestly think the Ravens game plan was just horrendous. This is a 49ers team from a game planning perspective. Like, they've been beaten up by two of their previous opponents, but I kind of debunked the narratives of like they're bad against the run. Well, the Lions were able to take Penei Sewell and put him at tight end and motion him. Like, the Chiefs don't really have that in their repertoire because they're not going to take away Travis Kelce off the field, or they're not going to go to. They like running a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. So for me, it comes down to this: is Rashee Rice ready to be that elite level receiver? Can Charvarius Ward defend him? And if that isn't the case, I could see the 49ers coming away with this Super Bowl similar to the one that we saw when the 49ers played, or the Chiefs played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where Mahomes is constantly running for his life and none of the other players are stepping up in this big moment.
Yeah, and they do have the talent on the defensive line to make that happen. They just haven't really come together this year, and it could be like a scheme issue. Do you think that that's a Steve Wilks thing, or do you think that's regression on the players' part?
I think it's more so just like repetition. These guys were always in and out of lineup. Chase Young was added late in the season. Like, for me, this could easily come in this game. They could just kind of play to their full strength. And like, Chase Young has been bad against the run this postseason. So is Bosa from my angle of like watching the games. And it's just they're getting out of their run fit thinking teams are passing on them and they're used to playing with it. And this could be the first game in the playoffs where they actually play with a lead. They're not playing with a lead. Their defense usually kind of crumbles. We saw that last season when the Chiefs came down to San Fran and beat them 44-23.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's overall, I think it's a really good matchup for San Francisco. I'm kind of with you on that. I think that it could be one of those games like the Tampa Bay game a couple years ago. I've been underestimating the Chiefs, though, like for the last few playoff games. I had them losing to Buffalo, and I had them losing to Miami before the weather issues started to come into play and the defensive injuries. When we were doing best ball drafts for playoffs, I was drafting a lot of Miami because I thought that they had a really good matchup. But then they started losing their defensive players, and then we got hit with that weather situation over in Kansas City, and it ended up not working out so well for Miami in that one. But Kansas City has definitely been overachieving in these playoffs. And I think that, obviously a large part of that is because Travis Kelce has come to life. One of the things that, I've been talking about, like on these showdown shows and whatnot, is Travis Kelce was probably going to get that muscle memory where he gets into the playoffs and then he starts to realize that it's time to step it up and everything. And he's delivered. He's had a few monster games. We take a look at his game log recently. He had 32 points against Baltimore last week. He had 24.5 against Buffalo the week before that. And then he had 14 against Miami. So he's had 3 pretty strong games in a row in these playoffs after not really the strongest regular season. He was hurt for a lot of it. He got off to a really slow start, but he's starting to pick it up at the right time. What are your thoughts on Travis Kelce and his matchup?
With Kelce, again, he has an advantage on Dre Greenlaw. The biggest thing with him is it's so impossible to predict how he's going to play because he doesn't run routes. He just goes out there and is sees the coverage that's being played and is I'm gonna find the soft spot and I'm just gonna be the way I would compare it is Jokic in basketball, where you're not really understanding how he is just so much better than everybody else on the floor. But he is, and you just kind of accept that he finds ways to get open, and he does it by literally not playing the way football is supposed to be. He doesn't play within the rules. He colors outside the lines, and he has a quarterback that, again, Mahomes will buy him time to find that soft spot.
Yeah, and one of the things with them having a couple weeks to prepare for this game, San Francisco is only running man coverage at 32%, 33% rate. And Patrick Mahomes is really bad against man coverage this season. I think he has been in the past too. He's got an 89 passer rating against man coverage and a 60% completion percent. Do you think that they're going to adjust and use more man coverage in this game against the Chiefs? Would that even make sense from their scheme perspective? Or
they could, but it's kind of when they're going to run man coverage, it would probably be third and short, those types of situations. The man coverage rates in the NFL are just dropped for the last 4 or 5 years. And the reason is because these receivers and crossing routes in motion just creates so much of a headache for coaches. So hey, this guy, you got this guy if he goes here. And with the Chiefs in particular, if you try to play man against them, what they'll do is they'll bunch, which basically means just 3 guys going together close to the line of scrimmage. And then Kelce will either be the point man, basically being a wall for someone underneath, like Rashee Rice or Richie James or one of those guys, or he'll go ahead and just be behind everybody and let them clear out and see where what the defender is going to do to him. And as a result, then he just finds the open space in the flat or just over in the middle of the field. I think the 49ers last season with D'Amico Ryans tried to go that route. They also tried to give Mahomes single high coverage, which is just one safety back there. And Mahomes in the Netflix show, the quarterback, he's if they're going to play single high, I get to play football again. Because what people don't realize is Mahomes can still throw the football 40 to 50 yards down the field and create those explosive plays. NFL teams are just refusing to let him do that. And it's resulted in him becoming a more methodical quarterback like a Tom Brady or some of the other guys that in the game have been so phenomenal. And now that he's learned both, it's kind of you just got to hope your D-line hits him because that's the only chance you're really getting at stopping him consistently.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of Patrick Mahomes, let's take a look at what he's done recently. He's kind of had, obviously, a down season for Patrick Mahomes standards. There's very few weeks where he's crossed 20 DraftKings points. And then, of course, in these playoffs, his last 3 weeks, he got 15 DraftKings points against Baltimore, 18.5 versus Buffalo, 18.5 against Miami, and then 13 and 17 before that. But I think Patrick Mahomes is a guy that we can probably pencil in for about 18 DraftKings points in this one. What would you think on that, Jordan?
No, that sounds about right. It's just one of those things, like, he's gonna run. Like, he's gonna be able to do a lot of things rushing, and it wouldn't surprise me if, like, from a containment perspective, he was able to find his way into the end zone. Obviously, he hasn't ran for any touchdowns in the postseason, but they've also really not been in spots for him to do that. And Pacheco has run so well every single game. The difference here will be that the 49ers, from a run game perspective, they've been bad in the postseason. They've been bad in certain moments. This is the type of game where I think from a run defense perspective, they're going to be much, much more improved.
Yeah. Yeah. And McCaffrey, we'll take a look at him. He's the guy obviously on the top of the player pool here. McCaffrey's been on fire last couple weeks, 30 DraftKings points against Detroit, 31 in 32 basically against Green Bay. Versus Washington in week 17, he only had 13 DraftKings points, but I'm sure there's a reason for that. But he's just a monster. He's been a monster all season, and basically he's going to be a key cog, obviously, in San Francisco's game plan. And I think he's going to be a key cog in figuring out your DraftKings Showdown lineups, because he's probably going to be the highest owned captain on the slate, and that is going to restrict your ability to put a team around him pretty significantly with the salary constraints that you're going to be dealing with. But what are your thoughts here on Christian McCaffrey this week?
The fact that he's had over 90 rushing yards in back-to-back games when they were down 28-7, they were down to Green Bay pretty much that entire game. Like, from a usage perspective, if they end up playing with a lead, there's a chance that McCaffrey gets 28-30 carries and then also is still catching the ball. It's very difficult for me to imagine the complete pathways to failure for McCaffrey, but on Showdown, we're always looking for leverage, and his playmakers around him are the ways that he fails, like Juszczyk stealing a touchdown, Kittle stealing some touchdowns in the red zone. Like, that's the path for it. But from a usage perspective, it's hard to imagine a dude who's, again, just all negative game scripts this postseason, still getting over 90 yards rushing. I was able to get him as a prop over 87.5 earlier in the week, but now he's moved up to like 90, 92.
Nice. Yeah. And McCaffrey, like you said, I mean, it's going to take a lot for him not to be probably the highest raw point scorer on the slate, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to put him in a captain spot. I think that's one thing that you said about Juszczyk. Juszczyk scored, I think, like 3 touchdowns in 4 games versus Kansas City, or 2 touchdowns in 3 games. I can't remember which one, but he has a touchdown history against Kansas City. And, I could definitely see McCaffrey, having a touchdown taken away by Juszczyk. But I still think that McCaffrey is a guy that you're gonna want to have in most of your lineups, at least in the flex. I think you can get away with captain getting away from him, but I think in flex you pretty much want to have him locked in, barring injury or something like that. I think he's pretty much going to make the optimal lineup. But I do think that you can put a guy like Juszczyk in there in addition to McCaffrey to kind of justify not having him in the captain spot. I think a guy like Juszczyk could be just enough to keep him out of the captain, but not out of a optimal lineup. And what I like about Juszczyk, since we're talking about him, is he's pretty cheap. He's only $800 on this slate, and every game against Kansas City, I think he's had about 4 targets. I'll go over to his Pro Football Reference page right here, and the last game that they played against him in the playoffs was the Super Bowl, and that's where he had a touchdown. He had 3 receptions for 39 yards and a touchdown. Previous games against Kansas City in 2022, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 34 yards, no touchdowns in that one, but in the other 2 games, he had 4 targets, 2 receptions, 38 yards and a touchdown, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 26 yards and a touchdown. Jordan, do you think there is something in Spag's scheme that Shanahan likes where they go back to Juszczyk with 3 to 4 targets a game?
Well, it comes down to the blitzing habits. I will say from Spag's perspective, he's adapted to the modern day NFL. He uses so much more two safeties deep than he has in previous years, and he blitzes in like a timely fashion. He's no longer the highest blitz rate in the NFL, which is something that he used to be. And also knowing Patrick Mahomes is on the like that he has the offense that they have, like the scheme is fluid. It's not like we have to create plays. It's like, hey, we just got to hold them to like 24 and we have a chance to win every single game because our offense can score 28 on anybody. So Spag's perspective, like he's going to blitz in a timely fashion. Against Purdy, it's going to be really interesting because Purdy just showed off his legs. Like, how often does he spy? Like, how does he create some of these things? Because he's one of the best defensive coordinators in today's NFL because he understands the personnel he has. And from Juszczyk's perspective, Juszczyk is going to be picking up a lot of blitzes, but he's also going to be leaking out on a ton of those as well. So Purdy's going to have the option to try to hold on to it to create the bigger play, or just take the flat with Juszczyk, take the flat with McCaffrey, and just kind of get that ball out quickly when it's obvious they're bringing pressure.
Yeah, and Juszczyk just last week had that great toe tapping reception on the sideline to get Brock Purdy out of a tight spot. So that was he's definitely a guy that San Francisco likes to go to, and he's a guy that you want to keep in your player pool, I think, this week.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Let's go to Brock Purdy. Purdy, we've talked about him a bunch. Does well under pressure. Does well against the blitz. Does well against man coverage. So on paper, has a good matchup. I think the psychological edge is going to be where Purdy might give way to Patrick Mahomes in this matchup. These teams have a tendency to psych themselves out. With the Bills, they had the ability to pass the ball and they went run heavy against the Chiefs. With the Ravens, they have the ability to go run heavy and they went pass heavy against the Chiefs. So you can't really win either way, no matter what the game plan is, because if you go run heavy, they're going to criticize you for keeping Patrick Mahomes in the game. If you go pass heavy, they're going to criticize you for not taking advantage of that Chiefs weakness. With Brock Purdy, like you said, he showed that ability to scramble last week, and he does well under pressure. So it'll be interesting to see which approach they take. Obviously, with a guy like Christian McCaffrey, it's likely that they're going to take a run heavy approach, but you can't really write off Purdy. And I kind of like Purdy more than Mahomes as far as a fantasy perspective in this matchup. What are your thoughts on Purdy from a fantasy perspective?
From a fantasy perspective, like I do believe there's pathways for him to throw the ball enough. Again, he's never really played with volume. Last 2 weeks he played with volume and his output wasn't even that high. Like considering what he's done in the past, like you could see the Arizona game, 25 attempts, but he had 25 DraftKings points, and then you see Detroit and Green Bay over 30 and just not as much. Again, his pathway comes down to touchdowns. So if you're playing him, it's very he could be spread with it, and you could be playing him as a captain. I would lock in at least 2 of the pass catchers. And then if you're playing him as the flex, it's a situation where maybe it's just McCaffrey with Purdy and no other 49ers, and hoping 2 of McCaffrey's 4 touchdowns are receptions. That type of thing. So again, Purdy from a fantasy perspective, I think is great. I'm interested to see how the field is playing him. Field's gotten a lot sharper in years past, but ownership for quarterbacks has actually dropped a lot.
Yeah, and I think that the game manager aspect is something that we're going to want to pay attention to, because if people are heavier on Patrick Mahomes than Brock Purdy, then I think that's going to give us an opportunity. I haven't seen any like real ownership projections come out yet that kind of leans me one way or the other, but I think the way that I go with Purdy is going to depend on where the field is on Purdy as comparison to Patrick Mahomes. I don't think that you need to have both quarterbacks in the lineup this week, but what are your thoughts on that?
It's going to get overplayed. I would rather go from the game, just following Gamescript and Showdown is the way to go. So It's for me, like 3-3 builds are going to be the most popular. That's just the way that this type of spread tells you where the field is going to go. I am going to be going more 4-2s, 5-1s on the San Fran side, just because I think the pathway to go San Fran domination is a lot easier than it would be from like the Kansas City Chiefs side, especially with the Kansas City Chiefs offense and how like correlated or how concentrated it is. While the 49ers, like it feels like they get some chip plays from your Juwan Jennings, from Elijah Mitchell, Juszczyk. Like these guys, obviously not a ton, but I think from a showdown perspective, you'll be able to get enough. And I think a lot of people are going to go into the Jerick McKinnon hype if he comes off IR.
Yeah, and Jerick McKinnon, I'll probably avoid him altogether, even if he comes off IR. I just think that Pacheco has taken over that backfield, and even when Jerick McKinnon was healthy, Pacheco was still getting the majority of the work over there. So I hope that people get on that Jerick McKinnon wagon and he gets more than he should. But from a perspective of the breakdowns that you're talking about, the 4-2 versus 3-3. If I go into RotoGrinders Optimizer and just on their base projections, if I put out 150 lineups, I'm seeing a 4-2 build in favor of Kansas City is 50% of those lineups, and San Francisco is 2.67% of those lineups. So, I mean, that is just, at the very base level of, how an optimizer might lead people more towards those 4-2 Kansas City builds. And if you're like Jordan or myself and you kind of lean more San Francisco on this one, I like those 4-2 San Francisco builds, especially if we're going to get a discount on them.
Yep. And again, you always want to be going away from the field. That's just kind of how that's how you create your biggest opportunity for winning these types of slates. It's very, very, very difficult to solo, but again, if we end up seeing very low played 4-2 builds, you put yourself in a lot better position.
Yeah. So speaking of the running back situation over in Kansas City, Pacheco, we just talked about him. He has been lighting it up these past few weeks. We see him 18 DraftKings points against Baltimore, 18 against Buffalo, 16 versus Miami. So on far as the playoffs, he's been on fire. And then he had 32.5 in week 17 against Cincinnati. But he's been pretty consistent this season, and he's basically taken off as the main running back in the Kansas City offense. We've seen it with Pacheco. We've seen it with Rice. Those guys are the ones who are kind of stepping up as this offense progresses. And, they kind of work in these younger players. And Patrick Mahomes puts a little bit more, faith in them as far as Rashee Rice. And then the offense in general puts a little bit more trust on Pacheco as well. And they've kind of been giving way to Pacheco, given the weaknesses of the wide receiver core that Kansas City is dealing with right now. But what are your thoughts here on Pacheco in this matchup against San Francisco?
It depends. It's going to come down to the ownership game. If he's getting overplayed, in my opinion, like towards the later half of the week, if he get then I will be completely avoiding him. If he is not because I feel like McKinnon could pull away from him. If McKinnon's pulling away from him enough, then yes, he becomes kind of a better play to me. I definitely lean into where is the field going here, because again, San Fran's run defense has been bad the last 2 weeks. Matt LaFleur's receivers in the way that they blocked was tremendous. The Lions' run scheme and the way that they just operate as an offense is tremendous. The Kansas City Chiefs have been really good running the football this postseason from a yards perspective, but in this matchup, it's kind of like I don't think San Fran, like all three of the games, Baltimore, Buffalo, and Miami, it felt like the Chiefs were just handling them. Like the Chiefs were just in the driver's seat. They're controlling the game. And especially against Baltimore, where they took that early lead and then they saw Baltimore just abandon the run game. So they're like, well, we can chew clock. Like we're fine taking 3 yards, and then it's a 3rd and 4 for Patrick Mahomes. For San Fran, they put the gas on the pedal early on in the game, then I don't think Pacheco's getting to these 20. I mean, he could get to the 15 carry mark. He's not going to be as efficient as he was in Buffalo because Buffalo's run defense, again, much worse. We talked about that pre-show, and they're just much injured or very injured on that side. The 49ers with Fred Warner and Greenlaw are not going to allow that type of game from him, especially with 2 weeks to prepare and kind of like, hey, we know our offense gets that early lead. They're going to put the ball in Mahomes' hands and just trust that he's going to make plays.
Yeah, and they've shown that with Pacheco, they're not afraid to target him either.
Yep.
We saw him get 4 targets against Baltimore. We looked down a little further. We saw 7 against Cincinnati in that week. We saw 4 against Vegas, 4 against Green Bay, 5 against Vegas again. So they haven't been afraid to target him. He got 6 against Denver. So, he's not necessarily going to be wiped out with Gamescript, but he's definitely going to take a hit if Kansas City falls behind and they need to lean more on the passing game, because he's not like one of those running backs that they're going to work heavily into. I don't think into playing from behind script, but they're going to definitely keep him active in the game, but probably just not active enough if it is a situation where San Francisco's playing with a significant lead. I do like his price though at 8K there.
Yep.
That's a pretty good price for him, considering what the slate is like, and the need for some salary relief this week, because we're going to need to find some guys that are kind of off with their salaries. But I mean, that might lead to higher exposure to Pacheco by the field in general. So, like you said, it's going to be kind of ownership game with him for me too. One thing that I'll mention, Jordan, I want to get your thoughts on this, is Warren Sharp called it out a couple weeks ago, how San Francisco has been weak against the outside zone running schemes.
Yep. And
the Chiefs have had some success with outside zone this season. Do you think that is something that they're going to work into their game plan? And do you think that San Francisco, being aware of those weaknesses these last few weeks, especially against Aaron Jones and Gibbs and Montgomery, do you think that they're going to adjust for that? How do you think that they would adjust for that?
So from a run game perspective, like your outside zone works when your offense line's in sync and your offense line doesn't create the gaps to shoot them. And without Joe Thuney, it becomes very difficult, in my opinion, just because he's one of the best guards in the NFL. And that side of the offense line is hurting. Obviously, you see the dip in production against Baltimore from an average perspective. Baltimore's run defense wasn't really that good overall this season. They just have 2 linebackers that everybody knows their names, and overall they've been quote unquote, they've been one of the better defenses in football. So from with stopping outside zone, it's gonna come down to this defense line just simply winning and making sure that they're able to contain the gaps. Chase Young knows they're going to run at him. It's what it's been working for a lot of teams this postseason. The 49ers also know it. The other thing that's going to be very, very important is the 49ers defensive backs and being able to come down to make plays. Personnel usage also is going to be a huge factor here. Do the Chiefs go to tight ends, and does that allow the 49ers to get an extra linebacker on the field? Because when the Lions put out Sewell, they didn't really know what personnel to go to when he was playing tight end. Like they had no, they were playing their base defense, which is nickel with 2 linebackers out there, and it was just getting killed. Like I think there will be a lot of adjustments made this week, and I think it's going to be a lot about personnel usage and then how to make everything work from that. So run game wise, outside zone, like yes, it's been successful. Can it be with Joe Thuney, without Joe Thuney? And what do we see with 2 weeks of rest for San Fran in this big game?
Yeah, and like you said with Chase Young, he got a lot of heat this week, these past couple weeks for giving up on that play, or seemingly giving up on that play where Jahmyr Gibbs ran it in for a touchdown. So he's taking a ton of heat, and he's a good player. He's a player that has like a pedigree background. So don't be surprised to see Chase Young kind of step it up this week. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right. So let's look at some of these receivers here. We're looking at first. We'll take a look at the San Francisco side. We got Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk, and with the Kansas City defense, they are much better against wideouts than they are against slot receivers. And we can see it in the DraftKings points allowed. We've seen the Chiefs allow only 7.2 DraftKings points a game. This is going from week 12 on to wideouts, and they've allowed 18 DraftKings points a game to slot receivers. I think that gives Deebo Samuel an edge over Brandon Aiyuk. And I think that Samuel would be less likely to get that Snead coverage than Aiyuk. But what do you think on this, Jordan? Do you see anything that stands out in these matchups and the defensive scheme that Kansas City is running that would give one of these receivers an advantage?
So with 49er scheme, like I said, they bring a lot of Juszczyk in there with Kittle. So you don't really get like the slot receiver. Like you have two guys who can align in the slot, but it's very rare that they just like take McCaffrey completely out of the backfield and they have just a spread formation like that. So Deebo and Aiyuk kind of both play like out wide primarily. They don't really go those three wide receiver sets unless Jawan Jennings enters the field. They could, I guess, in this matchup, but I also feel like that's playing into the strength of Kansas City. So the player that I think just has the biggest advantage would be Deebo from the standpoint of just scheme touches, being a part of the run game. Like there's no reason Deebo Samuel can't run the ball in this matchup, especially with the 2 weeks of rest from his shoulder injury. But the other thing about Aiyuk that I will mention is that it's going to be one-on-one coverage. I don't think the safeties are going to be helping to that side of the field. I think the safeties are going to be focusing on the run game, Kittle, and trying to prevent these crossing routes. So Aiyuk's going to have one-on-one on the outside with one of the best corners in football, and it's fire on fire. It's, Aiyuk proved that you're one of the best receivers in the NFL, which I genuinely believe he is. I think Aiyuk is a top 10 receiver. He just plays in a scheme that doesn't need him to be. And obviously Kyle Shanahan it's been an up and down career arc for Aiyuk with getting put in the doghouse and literally being benched for a few weeks. But Shanahan's got him to buy into what he's doing. And as a result, like Aiyuk can make big plays in this game. He'll probably have opportunities down the field. I don't think Kansas City's going to look at Purdy as a guy who could throw it deep. They're going to kind of treat him as a guy that we don't want him to throw it short. So again, Aiyuk can beat L'Jarius Snead. It's going to be a great battle, but it's going to be coming down for me who I want to play through ownership.
Yeah, and one thing that I've noticed about Shanahan and his demeanor these last couple years is he softened up a lot, because he used to be, kind of a hard-nosed type of coach, do it my way or the highway type of guy. Mm-hmm. But I think as the team has kind of stuck together, like they've had a lot of retention with some of their stars on the offense at least, and they've kind of gotten used to the system. And Shanahan obviously had to put a lot of trust in Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant coming in last year, and like taking over the offense basically. He's kind of softened up, and he's put out a lot of praise for Brandon Aiyuk recently. So I think he's got a lot more trust obviously in Aiyuk. And after that play last week, he was had very high praise for Aiyuk last week. But yeah, I think with what you just mentioned, like that's going to be important, because I think a lot of people might lean Deebo in this matchup. I haven't seen where the ownership is pointing, but I think if you see a significant discount on Aiyuk, then that would be interesting as far as especially a captain perspective, because if people are fearing the matchup against Snead, like Snead's went the entire season up until Khalil Shakir a couple weeks ago without allowing a touchdown. And then last week he gave up another touchdown. So he's not invincible,
No, and also just again, it's going to be the narrative of the postseason where Kelce and Rashee Rice have over 200 yards receiving. They obviously, I guess, have that extra game, but in general, Marquez Valdez-Scantling has more yards receiving than Brandon Aiyuk right now in the postseason, at least. So that's why I think the 4-2s of Kansas City are going to be played a lot more, and that is also why I like a lot more 4-2s going San Fran's way.
Yeah, and look at some of these some of these games. Like he had 20 DraftKings points against Baltimore. Obviously, another tough pass defense. Try to look down here a little bit more. 29 versus Tampa Bay, 19 versus Cincinnati, 23 versus Arizona. 36 versus Pitt. So he's had some captain worthy performances throughout the season. And that 20 points against Baltimore stands out because of Baltimore, being a tough pass defense. So, yeah, definitely, possible for Aiyuk to be a captain worthy guy this week.
Yeah.
Let's see. So if we're looking at that Kansas City side, we see Rashee Rice, like you talked about. Obviously, he's the guy that stepped up for Kansas City when they need a receiver. And I mean, he only had 13 DraftKings points against Baltimore last week, but he had 9 targets, and he had 12 targets against Miami a few weeks back, 12 targets against Las Vegas. He's had a lot of targets recently, and I think that he's definitely stepped up as the guy to kind of take Tyreek's place finally in this offense. But he's still a rookie playing in the Super Bowl, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on him, knowing that he's basically the only guy beyond Travis Kelce that they can rely on. So what are your thoughts on Rice in this game?
With Rice, he has an advantage on every corner not named Charvarius Ward. That's going to be the biggest thing for me, where I think San Fran should travel Ward to his spot because there's just no reason to put Ward on anybody else. That's going to be difficult for him. But if he finds ways to get on other guys, he will be much better producer there. His yards, obviously, in that Baltimore game were really low because he wasn't asked to be. Like, he wasn't going down the field. Like I said, Kansas City wanted to control the ball in that game. They proved that they could. They were throwing screens to him, the bubble screen areas. Like, Andy Reid is comfortable getting this guy the ball down the field and then in spots where he's just catching bubbles. Against the 49ers, they can get beat deep. I think Rashee Rice could be that role. I think MVS could get that one catch. But ultimately, it's like, I don't think he's doing it on Charvarius Ward. It's going to come down to scheme touch. The Miami game, Miami played cover 1, cover 0 at such high rates. They blitzed a ton. It wasn't the Vic Fangio scheme that I personally love. It's one of those things where they had to do with what they had. Like, they had no edge rushers. They had Bruce Irvin and James Houston getting signed and playing meaningful snaps in that game. They had never played a snap for him all season. But with Rashee Rice in this one, it's going to be difficult against Charvarius Ward. I will mainly be fading. I think he's going to get a lot of ownership. I think he's going to be more popular than Pacheco because of the fact that, technically Kansas City's playing from behind here, and that increases my like for Pacheco, but it's not, it's not certain yet that that's where we will see projections go.
Yeah, one thing that I'll add is week 12 on, Kansas City's given up only 14.6 DraftKings points a game to the slot. They've given up 16 to wideouts. So wideouts are definitely where they've been more vulnerable. And if we're looking at wideouts on the Kansas City side, we're basically looking at Valdez-Scantling, and we're looking at Justin Watson. Do you have a preference on those guys? What are your thoughts on that situation, Jordan?
If I had to say who my preference is, it's MVS. He's done it in the postseason with Mahomes. He's playing a little bit more snaps. He's gotten more targets. His ADOT is about 10 yards higher. So for me, I would lean that way. Other than that, I don't have any other preference in these pass catchers. Noah Gray's fine. Nothing crazy, but he's definitely a vital, or could be a great piece for the 1,800 price tag, depending on how the field's playing these cheaper guys. But I would lean NBS a pretty good margin over Justin Watson.
One guy that I think is interesting this week is Richie James. And the reason why I think that he's a little bit interesting, first of all, he's only $400, right?
Yep.
But Richie James, like they've been dying for a Kadarius Toney type. You know, all the chances that they've given to Kadarius Toney with all his screw ups this season and last season, and Sky Moore, guys like that, they really like those twitchy type of receivers. And Richie James might be able to fill that role. He's had a few games now with the Chiefs. He only got one target last week against Baltimore, but he got 2 targets against Miami, 2 against the Chargers. And, you know, do you think that this is the type of guy that they might try to get a little bit more work to kind of take that Kadarius Toney type of role in this game?
I don't know if you'll be able to get a ton of looks, but I do believe I would be playing him more. He's more of a guy that I think is like, I don't know why Justin Watson is playing more than him, but it's also, I guess, Travis Kelce. They want Kelce in the slot. They want Kelce in spots where he gets slot corners or linebackers, so they don't really tend to play a Richie James in that type of situation. For me, though, I do think Richie James is better than Kadarius Toney. I think he's better than McCole Hardman, but obviously Andy Reid and company don't see it that way, and they continue to limit his usage in these games.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So he might be an interesting guy. He might be one of those, you know, completely random Super Bowl guys that has a decent game or at least scores a touchdown. You know.
Mm-hmm.
And $400, you know, like that's a good price for him. Did we cover Kelce? I can't remember if I went over Kelce or not.
I don't think we did, but yeah, Kelce again. He's someone that just runs routes that nobody knows. Like he doesn't do anything that is to the book. He's very I'm just going to play my game and Mahomes will find me. He understands the routes that are running elsewhere, but he has his supposed route, but him and Mahomes are just on such a different level as a duo.
Yeah, this is where I was wondering if, you know, like they might go more man coverage just because of Kelce's ability to find the open space in zone coverage. Because if they go more man and kind of take that away a little bit from Mahomes, like I mean, if they're able to take Kelce out of the game plan, I just don't see how they're able to pull it off. And that's where we get into that what you were talking about with the 31-9 type of score that we saw in that Tampa Bay game. I do think that Kansas City's been playing a little bit above their skis recently. I do have that bias because I was fading them. I've been fading them every week, but you know, obviously they've been good enough to make it to the Super Bowl, and obviously they have that psychological edge over San Francisco in this matchup, not just from, you know, like a player perspective, but also from a coaching perspective. Now, I think people forget that Andy Reid, before he won that first Super Bowl, he was known for blowing it with, you know, clock situations and stuff like that, like blowing the big games. Part of the reason why he lost his job in Philly was because he used to blow these big games. And then when he got with Patrick Mahomes and obviously they won that first Super Bowl, they kind of got over that hump. Shanahan's kind of in that same situation where he needs to win that big game so that he can get rid of that taint. So Shanahan needs this win, and obviously Shanahan's one of the best coaches in the league. Like, do you think that he has some sort of psychological block in these big games? Do you think that he's going to be able to overcome it in this one?
Yeah, I mean, we always look at outcomes instead of like how they coached. I think like that goes back to just Dan Campbell last week, like the fourth down plays, like everybody's yelling at him for going for it on fourth down, but it's like that's just who he's been all year, and the guy dropped it. Like Josh Reynolds did not catch the pass, did not come through in him, and if they get that, they might be playing in this game. We won't be talking about it, but with Kyle Shanahan, it's kind of like I'm sure there's something in the back of his head thinking about it, especially if he gets a big lead. He had a big lead against Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. He had Mahomes dead to rights, and then one play sparked their offense, and they scored 21 points, and then Jimmy Garoppolo missed the throw. Like this is where it kind of hopes like your quarterback has to be in sync with your coach, where Purdy hopefully comes through for him this time. That's going to be a big thing. Like when Matt Ryan had the strip sack fumble on Dante Hightower, like that was just a great play by Hightower and Bill Belichick, where that's like 3rd and 1 past the 50. You can take your shot play. And at the end of the day, it didn't work because of the fact that Patriots just had a really good play call. Will the Chiefs have that? Maybe. Like Steve Spagnuolo is a great guy or a great play caller on the defense side of the ball, but Shanahan, I don't think it's too big of a pressure moment. Like he's been here and he's, his dad's won Super Bowls. His dad won a Super Bowl with Christian McCaffrey's dad. Like they have the experience of being around it. They just have to go and execute and hopefully come down and win this game.
Yeah, and I think that's where it comes back to Brock Purdy and just, having that it factor that I was talking about, that confidence to him. I think that he has the confidence to perform in a big game situation like this. I think Jimmy Garoppolo was lacking that, because every time they would cut to Jimmy G, you would see him like with this like frustrated or just like panicky look on his face. But with Brock, you don't get that. He always has that same demeanor, like he's not panicking in big situations. So, I just think that there's something there. It might be a little bit of a, like a sociopathic thing with Purdy, where he just doesn't like have emotions or whatever. But, like I do think that, like I think Shanahan feels much more confident in Purdy, and I think that says a lot. And that, in this situation, he might be more willing to put more on Brock than he would have for Jimmy G, and maybe that'll lead to less brain farts.
Yeah.
So the other guy, last main guy is George Kittle. You said that you liked him, Jordan. What was the main thing that you like about George Kittle in this matchup?
Mike Edwards is the worst player in the Chiefs secondary, and he's the guy that they could get matched up with Kittle. Running the ball, establishing play action, going under center. These are things the Chiefs haven't seen this postseason. They didn't see a quarterback go under center. Like the league doesn't see it as much anymore, which makes like the Lions and the 49ers and the Packers offenses like kind of unique to an aspect of why the Shanahan trees are getting better is because they adapt to what the league isn't doing, similar to what we do in DFS. With Kittle, this is just simply a matchup play. This is their advantage. This is the guy that can get it done for them when they aren't when the back's against the wall kind of thing. If from a blitzing perspective, like Kittle's been their main guy against blitzes for a majority of the year. This postseason, he's averaging almost 3 yards per route run against blitz coverage, like blitzes. And again, that's only with 10 targets. It's 108 yards. Like he is an outlet for Brock Purdy. He is the player that I think is the chess piece that gets this team kind of going. And I think he could have a multiple touchdown game. Like I bet him already over the 47.5 yards receiving mark. And I bet him an anytime touchdown and the first touchdown of the Super Bowl this weekend.
Yeah, that's a good nugget, man. And George Kittle, obviously, he's not going to be one of the guys that people are focused in as a captain, and he is 6,400 on DraftKings. So interesting matchup notes and matchup thoughts there by Jordan. So let's take a look real quick. The kicker situation, Moody, rookie kicker, drafted him in like the 3rd round, and he's been very sporadic this season. He's had a lot of games where he missed field goals. I don't think that they're going to want to turn to him too much in this game where they can avoid it. That's a lot of pressure to put on a rookie kicker that's kind of been up and down in a Super Bowl situation. Butker on the other hand is a very reliable veteran kicker, and he's had some massive weeks. We've seen him score 24 DraftKings points against Cincy, 14 against Miami, 10 against Buffalo in a game where Kansas City might struggle to push it downfield and potentially get stalled out in the red zone when the short game's not working. I would not be surprised to see Butker have a decent game. I would tend to lean away from Moody, though. What are your thoughts on the kickers?
Moody's he's just missed. Like he's just been missing field goals. Butker's my lean on the kicker aspect, but again, if Moody's going to be low owned, then he's a very, very, very good showdown play. Not many people play kickers. They don't like to. It's uncomfortable. But for me, like it's the best way to kind of get unique. Like kickers score points. Like they're a very, very big part of showdown slates, and I think they're always underplayed, to be honest.
Yeah, especially when you can get double-digit fantasy points from, like a $5,000 player. I mean, that's a pretty good return. And I'm with you on Butker. I lean Butker. I'm surprised Butker's 200 cheaper than Moody, honestly. But I think that that's obviously not going to go undernoticed by the field. So something to keep in mind there. Defenses, 49ers D versus the Chiefs D. Obviously, the Chiefs have one of the best defenses in the league. 49ers have struggled. That could be a scheme thing with Wilkes. We've seen the defensive line underperform like we talked about earlier. But as far as a defensive lean, where are you going here, Jordan?
I would go with the 49ers because I think their pass rush and just the way they play is I think they're going to step up big in this game. It's more of the game script lean. You want to play the defense of the team that you think is winning. Like you win. That's how usually you get opportunities for sacks, you get opportunities for sack fumbles. And I think one of the wrinkles that 49ers could add is basically they did it against Jacksonville. They went 5 D linemen and 1 linebacker. It's the same move that Bill Belichick ran against the Rams in the Super Bowl just a few years ago. And I think they're going to rush 5 pretty much majority of the game and kind of play like quarters coverage behind it, which is their zone scheme, and see what happens there. I think that's one move that they'll make, and they'll get some turnovers and pressure to Mahomes on it.
Yeah, and I just think that the matchup for the 49ers D is so good with the weakness of their defense being wideouts and, having, MVS and, Justin Watson or whoever as their primary wideouts and them being stronger in the middle of the field against, their slot receiver and Travis Kelce. I just think that the matchup on paper is good for the 49ers. Unless they start using Rashee Rice a lot more out wide. I mean, which is definitely something that they could do. What do you think with that? Do you think that the Chiefs would actively be trying to get Rashee Rice out wide more?
I definitely think they're going to attempt to, but again, Charvarius Ward should follow him. It's a zone coverage look, but it's like a sticky zone. So basically, like you're playing man who's in your zone. You're not just standing on one side of the field or running to that area of the field you're supposed to defend. So it's, again, I don't think I think getting Charvarius Ward off of him will be moving into the slot, but that's to be determined with that game. I don't think there should be any reason that he can't play a little bit more out wide this week, especially with their struggles. But it's going to come down to Mahomes generating plays by just scrambling. I don't think they're going to be able to just nickel and dime them up the field, which is what they were able to do against the Ravens.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as favorite cheap guys, do you have any favorite cheap guys in the dumpster diving range? I think Tony and Hardman are effectively being erased from the offense, but maybe you have a different take there. But is there anyone under the 2,000 mark, or maybe a couple guys that stand out to you the most?
Oh, we talked about Noah Gray. I think if people go to McKinnon, I have no problem with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then obviously Juszczyk is one of the favorites for always.
Yeah, for sure. I like Juszczyk a lot in this matchup. So Jordan, let's get into building a lineup here. Let's go with your favorite take on a captain. Like who's the captain that you like the most, and let's build a script around it.
My favorite captain is going to be George Kittle. That's how I'll be leaning this week, and assuming multiple touchdowns going his way.
Okay, so you've been selling me on Kittle. I had to lean more towards Samuel heading into this game, but I like what you're saying about Kittle. I think we put Purdy with Kittle. What do you think?
Yeah, we could go with Deebo as well in it. There's no reason we can't play both pass catch. Like Deebo gets the 100 yards, Kittle gets the 80 and 2 touchdowns. And then you have Purdy throwing for, maybe even Deebo scores. It's totally fine that way too.
So if we're going more pass heavy on this approach, do you think that do you think we should put Deebo in over McCaffrey, or do you think that we swap those guys out, or do you think that McCaffrey might have too much of a salary restriction with that 1,200 tag?
I think he could be too popular. I think it's like from a unique standpoint. If you're gonna play, like I said earlier, if you don't play McCaffrey, you got to be playing 2 of the big guys on their team. Kittle and Deebo fit that role, and Deebo can steal a rushing touchdown from McCaffrey as well.
Gotcha. So if we're going in this direction, we got the passing game going for San Francisco. Do you want to put in Pacheco as our chief, as our main chief? Okay,
that's what I was going to go with. Pacheco for sure here in this type of build. And then I would say that we want Butker as well on the as a kicker, the kicker running back duo there for that standpoint. And I think that ends up building our lineup.
Yeah, I mean that puts us in a good spot. We're left with 8,200. Like if you wanted to go with Rice, you go more with that 3-3 build, like we were mentioning at the top, which is probably going to be a popular way to go. You also have you also have like the other kicker if you wanted to go double kicker. You got 49ers D Jennings. If you want to go that direction, would you actually like Jennings? Well, I don't know. Who would you lean like in this situation, Jordan?
In this situation, like I think I would lean towards Moody. Just assume maybe like early on in the game they get down the field with Kittle and Deebo, but they don't score points. And then you see the Chiefs take a lead. Like again, double kicker lineups are usually not getting played. This doesn't have Mahomes, McCaffrey, or Kelce. I highly doubt many lineups are going to go without at least one of those three. And this is again, I don't play many 3-3 builds, or I guess this would be a 4-2. But if you even with a 3-3, I think this is one of the more unique 3-3s because of the players up top that you're fading.
Yeah, and that's a good point because I mean this lineup is not going to be replicated because I think 80% of the field is going to have Christian McCaffrey in some proportion in their lineup, whether it's captain or in the flex, 80 to 90%, I'd say.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right now you're competing against 20% of the field, basically. And yeah, that's a good point with the double kickers because the lineup is realistic because we got Purdy passing to Deebo and Kittle, right? They're racking up the PPR points. Kittle's getting the touchdowns. Deebo's getting the PPR yards. Purdy's benefiting from the pass catching in general. Pacheco on the other side is having success against San Francisco. The passing game is getting shut down. Patrick Mahomes is not having success getting the ball to Kelce, which would also lend itself to leaning more on Pacheco.
Yep.
And Rice, of course, is struggling against that San Francisco secondary.
Yeah.
So Butker, comes in and takes advantage of mopping up the points. So Pat Mahomes can't get those touchdown points. And Pacheco obviously having some rushing yard success and touchdown success. And then we have Moody in there to kind of keep that score relatively low because I think we're going to need a lower scoring game to get Kittle and the captain there. So yeah, I mean, I think that lineup makes a lot of sense. So let's clear this out. Let's do one. The most popular captain is going to be McCaffrey. Let's see if we can build one with McCaffrey real quick and make it make sense and also make it try to limit like our downside on it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for me, like when I'm usually playing a running back captain, like it makes me really inclined to play the defense, just from the correlation perspective of like goal line situations. I also think that the 49ers defense is not going to be played anywhere near as much as the Chiefs because of Mahomes and just kind of thinking like this guy is not turning the ball over right now. Like he doesn't turn the ball over in the playoffs, but at the end of the day, we could get a fumble like we've seen McCole Hardman do plenty. They seem to like to give the ball to him for some reason. I don't know why, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and that weakness of those receivers. I mean, everybody's talking up MVS right now because he's made some big plays in the playoffs, but if they try to rely on him too much, then eventually that's going to turn, and MVS is going to show his weaknesses. So, yeah, definitely would not be surprised to see the 49ers have a big game there. If we want to go that direction, who's the chief that we want, like the big chief name that we want?
For me, I think it's Kelce. Not that Pacheco or Rice can't really get it done. But I also think from a salary constraint perspective, jamming in Kelce and McCaffrey will be a difficult one to do. But I think it's doable if you go to the 49ers defense.
Yeah, and I think this is the type of lineup where we don't have a quarterback. We're assuming that the Chiefs defense is doing their job in keeping Purdy limited, and the Chiefs offense is not clicking because Patrick Mahomes is only able to get it to Kelce in this type of build, but Patrick Mahomes costing 10-6 and potentially putting up 15 to 18 points. I don't think that's going to cut it in a build where we're trying to work in Kelce outscoring Mahomes and also McCaffrey being a captain worthy score that's going to justify his salary. So let's go down a little bit here. Let's try to find some salary relief. Maybe is there who do you like for salary relief at this point?
I mean, there's no reason that Juszczyk can't be a part of it. Obviously, I know a lot of people we talked about him taking away from McCaffrey, but like, what if it is this type of game where Juszczyk steals a goal line touchdown? McCaffrey is also getting catches from a PPR perspective, not getting a ton of yards because he's catching it in the flat. And then Juszczyk just gets a touchdown that obviously takes away from Purdy even more. And it also allows us to actually play some of the top guys here too.
Yeah, that sets us up to be able to put in like Pacheco, to put in Rice if we wanted to. I think, if we got Kelce in there, I think Pacheco would make a lot of sense. What do you think there?
Yeah, no quarterback build. That's a good way to go about it as well. And then obviously with 8,600, like you can go the kicker with Moody if you want to stay towards the 4-2s of being unique. You can obviously go to Kittle. Not Kittle. Rashee Rice if you want to just hope the Chiefs are kind of playing from behind in this build, and it's like receptions but not scoring points. But also Butker as well. Both kickers make a lot of sense with this type of build.
Yeah, I my favorite there would be Kittle as well. Like that gets us our 4-2 San Francisco build. You don't necessarily need a quarterback in that build because Kittle's helping to move the ball downfield. Maybe he scores a touchdown, but it's not enough to get Purdy into this type of lineup. But yeah, I like the no quarterback builds a lot in these showdown slates, especially when Patrick Mahomes is on the slate, because people still think that he's got the ability this season with this team to put up a bunch of DraftKings points, and we've seen that he has not had a whole bunch of weeks with 20 plus DraftKings points this season. We've seen it once against New England, 2 times Las Vegas, and then he had some in the early stages of the season. But in general, like these last back half of the seasons, he's only done it a couple times as they've leaned more heavily on the run, and as the Chiefs in general have had those struggles. So like I definitely like going Kittle in this build and leaving some salary on the table.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't agree. Don't be afraid to leave salary on the table. It's how you get unique. A lot of people are always afraid of doing that, end up changing their entire build. I've seen that happen way too many times.
Yeah. All right, so let's do one more. Let's do one with where we put Pacheco in that captain spot. $800 is pretty cheap for Pacheco. Get that salary discount and put him in the captain spot. Where do we think we go with this? I think we're both sold on Kittle. Do you want to just plug Kittle in there?
Yeah, Kittle for pass catching. I think at 10K, Purdy's very playable for this type of build with Pacheco leading the way.
Okay.
This again tells me it's playing from behind.
Yeah, and let's get McCaffrey in there because I think we've saved enough salary to be able to afford him. That's leaving us with 4,800.
I would go. See, this is a 3-3 build for me where I'm like Bucker and Chiefs D. Like Chiefs defense steals yards and a touchdown, maybe. Like they even score against the 49ers, and then you're sitting there with Pacheco just running the ball. And the Chiefs just trying to play with the style that they've played with most of the playoffs, which is we're limit possessions and take advantage of every possession we have.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a good direction to go. I think also if you wanted to try something a little different, McCaffrey's not in the captain, and maybe that's because we got Juszczyk taking one of those touchdowns. That leaves us with 8,800, and that leaves us with the ability to get Aiyuk in there if we wanted to. We got Purdy in there.
Yeah, 5-1 of the 49ers with a Chiefs captain is very, very unique.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that gets us a little bit different there. You could put Rice in there too if you wanted to, just to get yourself a second, like second Kansas City guy if you wanted to go in that direction. But there's a few options there. But thanks guys for watching. Make sure to hit that like button. Looking for about 30 likes. I think 20. I can't remember which one I said, but whatever I said at the top, get that amount of likes, and I'll put out a show later on in the week. And then make sure to hit the subscribe. I'm 20 short of 500. That's my goal for the end of the season. Get me to 500 subscribers on YouTube. And Jordan, where can they find you and your content?
Jordan Vanek, DFS, over on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Be on the lookout to see kind of what's next for me as I navigate the journey after departing ways with the 33rd team. Don't know necessarily what's in store for me, but I do know I will be putting out plenty of content throughout the week for me.
Yeah, Jordan puts out some great matchup content for these showdowns, especially really into those schemes and figuring out the weak spots in schemes and finding out the wide receivers with the best matchups based on that. So Jordan is a guy that I definitely actively look for his work to find out, which wide receivers might have the best matchups and which guys we might be able to lean on captains and stuff. You've heard me cite probably about 3 guys on this show. Jordan is one of them. So got a lot of respect for him. And I know that, big things are in the future for him. So, make sure to follow him over on Twitter, and good luck, guys. I will see you for the next show a little bit later on. I also have another breakdown of the Super Bowl, which I posted a few days ago. You can check that out on the YouTube page. Thanks, guys.